An artist friend of mine named Noah Scalin created a skull a day for a year. Now, what does that have to do with Passover and spiritual practice, the topics of this sermon? Well, Noah committed to a purposeful, intentional daily act. And he put checks in place, such as sharing it on social media. And these checks encouraged and motivated and, let's be honest, pretty much forced him to keep it up. And he set a rule. Each creation had to be a skull. Now, rather than limit his creative expression, these boundaries and these pressures encouraged more of it. And rather than distracting him from day-to-day life with this anxiety of wondering, how am I going to keep coming up with 365 unique skulls, it actually forced him to focus his energy each day, enabling him to then return to all the other craziness, reset, and refocused. Spiritual practice can be anything that centers the spirit. When I started seminary and I was told I was required to engage a regular spiritual practice, I imagined it as something strict and something time-consuming, and I tried various things, daily meditation, journaling, a few other things, but nothing stuck. You see, it takes time and it takes practice to develop something more involved like that, which are great spiritual practices. But I didn't have the time. I needed spiritual centering immediately. I didn't have the time or the resources to, let's say, join a Zendo or some sort of spiritual gym. I didn't have the discipline to build up that meditation muscle at this time. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the mental energy to commit to journaling. The fact is, especially during this moment of existential exhaustion, we all need a spiritual practice to start without delay. But few of us have the wherewithal to run out and join Go Yoga or buy $100 Zafu meditation cushion, let alone make an artwork each day for a year. It's just not going to happen. So let me put your mind at ease about your own ability to engage in spiritual centering by returning a moment to skull a day. Yes, some days the skulls would be complex, like when he enlisted friends for this nude skull on day 357. And some skulls were time-consuming, it's true, and they were very intentional, like this very detailed painting of a dog skull that I'm pulling up on the screen now. He made it on day 73. Or this skull I'm pulling up on that he made on day 10 that is made from cutouts of each state of the United States of America regrouped. Pretty involved. Other times, however, he simply had to just make do with what he had. Like the first skull he created, which I'm pulling up now, and was a simple paper cutout. There were extremely busy days, like the ones where he just arranged toothpicks into skull number 176, you can see here, as he ate in between busy meetings. Or the day he just made a skull sheet, like this one, in his hotel room for skull number 77. And then there were days, sometimes a few in a row, like days number 11 and 12, that were just over a week into this project where he was simply just too overwhelmed. These days it was all he could do to just think about making a skull. But when your awareness is heightened, however, even for a few moments, you notice things you otherwise might not have. And just thinking centered him enough to stumble upon skulls. He found some scraps of metal for day number 11. I'm pulling up a skull made out of scraps of metal. And on day 12, staring into space, trying to find something, anything that might feed his spirit, he noticed this, the cloud skull. I'm pulling it now, a skull in the clouds. Skull a day is one form a ritualized centering spiritual practice can take. Now, I also mentioned this is the season of Passover. We just passed that celebration, and I'll connect Passover to spiritual practice by giving you another example of committing to a daily ritual that I think will help part the waters, as it were. There is a Jewish commandment found in the book of Leviticus to do what is called counting the Omer. Now, Jews used to make an offering at the Temple of Jerusalem of a sheaf of grain, or an Omer of grain as it was called, as soon as the seasonal harvest began. And then they would count 49 days, it's a 50-day harvest, until the end of the harvest, when a final offering of a sheaf or an Omer of grain was made in gratitude for the fruits of the harvest. The harvest and the counting of the Omer began the day after Passover. Now, when there was no more temple, the counting of the Omer then became more of a daily spiritual practice. Since it began at Passover, which is the story of the Jews gaining freedom from slavery in Egypt, instead of celebrating the fruits of the harvest, the Omer now became a celebration of the fruits of that spiritual preparation in the desert leading up to receiving the Ten Commandments, which in the receiving of those commandments is another celebration known as Shavuot, or Shavuos, which occurs 49 days after Passover. This right now is also a month of spiritual renewal for our Muslim siblings. Ramadan is a time of reflection and heightened worship. And for both of these, Omer and Ramadan, there are checks and rules in place. Omer is counted in community, and each week is now often associated with one of the seven Sefirot, or emanations of the Kabbalist practice. They are Chesed, loving kindness; Gevura, might; Tiferet, beauty; Netzach, victory; Chod, acknowledgement; Yesod, foundation; and Malchut, kingdom. I myself have a great set of Omer cards that have a painting and words on each one that facilitates this daily connection. And Ramadan too. Ramadan involves fasting, it has rules, and involves extended prayer. There's also a set time period for both of these. Ramadan 29 days, Omer 49 days. So there is still intentionality in these daily spiritual practices. But the pressure now is less overwhelming. These are doable even during a time of existential exhaustion. They force practitioners to center themselves, enabling them to confront each new day, and confront as the Jews might have done, lost in the desert, preparing their spirits to meet the divine, however one imagines the divine to be. I'll repeat, spiritual practice can be anything that recenters the spirit, whether it's creating artwork a day for a year or simply counting, as long as it's intentionally centering. You see, defined more specifically, spiritual practice is anything that gives rise to a religious experience where one connects with the divine. And no, 3 years, almost 4, of seminary has not turned me away from humanism. It just opened my mind a bit. You see, as a humanist, Unitarian Universalist, my understanding of religious experience is as a transformative experience of awe, as a connection to the larger and profound divine that is the living energy that pervades all, within and outside of ourselves. Spiritual practice, therefore, can be an hour of meditation a day, or a fasting pilgrimage to Mecca, or it can be just a moment of reflection on a cloud. It can lead to extraordinary experiences and enlightenment, but it can also lead to a simple recentering of one's focus and one's energy, one's spirit. So all of these are spiritual practices. The writer Anne Lamott talked recently about existential exhaustion during this pandemic, or as she calls it, COVID college. She said her husband and her performed what she calls the sacrament of putter and ploppage. Now, this is not meant to be disrespectful to the idea of sacrament, which is an important ritual that connects Christians to the divine. What it is to say that if puttering around the house or plopping on the couch is all you have the spoons to do, and it is done purposefully to connect one's spirit to the larger divine energy, it too can become sacred, a spiritual practice. In the words of Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who is one of the first, I believe the second actually, self-identified Black mixed-race females to be ordained a Zen Buddhist priest. In her words, it's really important that we take our seat with intention and not just plop down in it. It's like you are really, truly taking your seat, the seat of your power. Feel a sense of connection of your roots right down through to the earth when you sit. To the earth. She's got you. She can hold you. That's where you get that integrity from, by sending down that taproot down. And if you plop down in that way, it's a spiritual practice. Anne Lamont also said, everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, even you. And that moment of unplugging is vital. If you can't get into a soul cycle class right now or sit in the lotus position for an hour, just submit to the slight pressure of a purposeful daily spiritual unplug. Be intentional to stop for a few moments, to look at the sky while you're walking the dog, or close your eyes to navigate your soul during a commercial between episodes of Schitt's Creek. I believe we all can commit to spiritual practice, especially as the world is wearing down so many of our spirits. Nurturing them is even more important for each present moment, yes, and in order to prepare us with renewed energy for meeting the divine in whatever form that takes for each of us when this pandemic ends. I'll finish by paraphrasing again Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who puts it succinctly and profoundly. She says, we want to connect with our core. So much of the way our society currently works, it's about cutting us off from that. And that cuts us off from what matters. We can't always find our yoga mat, she says. We can't always find our meditation cushion. We can't always burst out into ecstatic dance. But we can take that 30 seconds. It's a muscle. 10 seconds, 5 seconds. You build the muscle. You come back to what matters. You keep building that muscle. You come back to what matters. And as long as you keep coming back to what matters for you, we all benefit.